One of the great features about the iPad is the range of accessibility features we have. These are all built in, and some of these are really useful to support teaching and learning in a classroom, while others support the needs of individuals. We're going to have a look at some of these now and look at how we might use those. Let's start by looking at some of the features we can use on the iPad that really help and support teaching and learning. So I'm just going to go to a web page here, and we're looking at a fairly standard website about volcanoes that's got lots of nice colours and bright things, and maybe even some adverts down the side that could be a little bit distracting for some of the learners in the classroom. And one of the things we have on a lot of websites that we visit is the reader, which is these little lines up in the address bar. And simply tapping on that strips out all that distracting content, and it becomes much more kind of plain and focusing on the content. And it includes all the original images, but the text is nice and clearly presented, which for some children really helps focus on what we're supposed to be doing and keeping them on task. If I tap the button again, we're back to the original website. And it's a nice, simple, easy way of kind of making use of some of these accessibility features. In a similar way, if I tap and hold on some of these words, we have options to look up these words. Maybe I could pull out the blue markers to highlight a sentence. And I have a screen reader built in. I can just press the speak button.
A volcano is a mountain that opens downward to a pool of molten rock below the surface of the earth.
And this is something which can be really useful for children, particularly when we're presenting them with a lot of text-based information and saying, well, perhaps find some of the key facts in this. Sometimes listening to that in sections is easier for them to work with. And we just need to find out where we turn these things on, because by default, that's not automatically switched on. So let's just jump into our settings and go to General, and we can see here we have the accessibility option there, and the one I've just used there, the screen reader, is the one that says speech, and we just need to turn it on here, and it gives us our options to set the speed, and then in any web page or any book, if we tap and hold on a word, we can actually get the iPad to read it out. One of the other things that we can have a look at before we get into the accessibility features within the settings is if I just go to maybe notes or anything where I might want to type in here. So I could type in here, but I also have a dictation feature. I could press the microphone here. If I tap it now, welcome to iPad in Education. And we can see how the iPad will dictate exactly what we're saying. So I'm going to tap the button here and take us back to the keyboard, which is a nice way for some of the children to input the text. Let's have a look at these features here. So let's work our way through some of these key ones. We've already said speech is a useful one. Another one for teachers that's useful is the zoom feature. And the zoom lets us zoom into an area of the screen to make parts of it easier to read. But it's also quite nice when we've got an iPad AirPlayed to a big screen, and we can see bits of the screen in a lot more detail with information. And once it's turned on, if I use 3 fingers and double tap, I can zoom in to certain parts of the screen. I could say maybe we're looking for this app, or maybe we're looking at this particular button, but it's a really nice way of focusing on certain areas of the screen. If we work through some of these others that we can have a look at, we can see that a lot of these are fairly self-explanatory. We've got things like display accommodations where we can invert the colours, or we can change the brightness. We've got lots of others here for changing the button shapes or increasing contrast. We've got things like switch controls, which we can use with some learners. We can talk to external devices such as hearing aids. And we've got a few others which are quite useful. Guided access is a nice one, because this locks the iPad into a particular app, and we can use that then for things like controlled assessments. Let's have a look at some of these others which are a bit more interesting. Let's have a look at Assistive Touch. And if I turn Assistive Touch on, it puts this button on the screen. And this essentially is a software home button, but it gives us all sorts of other options to do different things. I could have a look at the device button, and we can go into various things like controlling the volume. So there are things that we can do with Assistive Touch as well. Let's have a final look at VoiceOver. Now, VoiceOver is a very clever aspect of the accessibility features. If you are going to have a look at this though, do look up quite how it works, because it does change how we use an iPad. So I'm going to turn this on.
VoiceOver on.
And now we can see that the iPad is highlighting certain areas, but if I come out of settings, as I drag my finger around, I can see the iPad is telling me where we are. So if I've got a visual impairment and I can't quite see what I'm pressing, the iPad is telling me exactly where we are. And to select one of these, I now double tap it.
Camera, viewfinder, focus unlocked, image. Double camera.
If I now use 3 fingers and I do, because I've got zoom turned on, a quadruple tap, it turns the screen off. So the iPad is still working,
FaceTime, calendar, photos, camera.
and I can launch the camera
Double tap to open.
without seeing the screen.
Camera, viewfinder, focus locked, image.
If I do a quadruple
Double tap
tap
to
again,
focus.
it will bring
Double tap
back,
and hold to adjust
the screen.
exposure. Screen curtain off.
and we're back to where we started.
Camera.
So let's go back into our settings
Settings.
and just turn that off for now.
Settings. Voiceover on. Voiceover off.
And that's a quick look at some of the accessibility features we have on the iPad.